Go straight into it.
Well, Stuart, welcome to Out of the Blank podcast. And if I had to ask you, what's something on your mind 24/7, or what's something that you're heavily interested in, I'd say?
Hmm. 24/7. Probably the lack of sleep that I have due to having a child. That's always on my mind. Do you know what it is? Because I do true crime podcast and I work and I've got a kid, there's not enough hours in the day, man. There's just not enough hours in the day to get shit done.
Well, first off, I have two questions now. What's your kid's name?
The kid's name is Mia.
Okay. Shout out to, is it a guy or a girl?
It's a girl.
Shout out
Yeah,
to
she's
her.
she's two.
Okay. And then what's the name of your podcast?
It's called British Murders. Repping the swag right now.
Oh, that's a nice jacket.
Yeah. So I got just set up a merchandise store last week. This website called Teespring. And this is like
Yeah.
the premium hoodie. It's comfy, man.
I
So comfy.
I find when I get like drunk, I get really creative with my designs on Teespring where people are like, that's an awesome shirt. I'm like, yeah, thank drunk me because sober me could not pick that out in a minute. But if I had to ask you, what's the difference between British true crime and then American true crime? Is it worse? Is it better? Is it crazier?
I think it's just less known. So most of the podcasts I listen to, true crime, is based on because the population's so big over there.
Yeah.
There's so many more bad people, I guess, because there's just more people there. So it
Yeah.
makes sense. And the notoriety of serial killers is just way more notorious in America than it is in Britain. So we still have some like next level sick in a bad way. Sick means good. Obviously, I don't know if that means good over there, but sick in a bad way too of serial killers. So we have like the most prolific serial killer in history is actually an English guy. So have you heard of Dr. Harold Shipman?
Harold Shipman.
Yeah,
I
he's
thought
dead
you were
now.
going like H. Holmes or something like that.
No, 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 no. So this guy was a general practitioner, which is what we call our general doctor. So you go to your doctor's office, we
I'll
call
be
it a G.
seeing one later today. Hopefully he doesn't kill me.
Well, this guy only killed old people or older people. So I'm assuming you're not in like your 60s.
All right. Look, I don't want to be that guy, but is it okay if it's an older person? Like if they're at the end of their days, they're like, I'm kind of just helping out a little bit. And then you suffocate them with a pillow is kind of wrong. But I mean,
Yeah.
what's the difference between saying that or being like, oh, it was COVID? It was like, okay, all right.
Well, this guy, I'm trying to think how he killed them. I think he injected um was it morphine? It was morphine. So he would shoot them up with so much morphine that it would just kill them. So like can you imagine like going from I've never had morphine myself or heroin, just for the record. But can you imagine having that much morphine and being like, fuck, this is so good, and then you just die? Like
What
that's
a way to, that's a nice guy in my opinion. If you're gonna get somebody really hied up before they die, it's better than getting like stabbed like eight. Like in my town, for instance, we had a crime that happened. So there was one that's really do you want to hear the really famous one, or do you want to hear the most like craziest one to me that happened when I was alive?
Let's hear the most famous, and I'll have the craziest one as pudding.
Okay. All right. Tapioca pudding is probably what that guy put the morphine in. No, but there was literally this they showed us in like this government class in like ninth grade. It was on 60 Minutes, that like really kind of documentary style show with the clock
Mm-hmm.
ticking, where you're like, where the fuck is that ticking coming from? But this couple from Virginia, I live in Ocean City, Maryland, had come to this beach town resort, and they literally found a couple, drugged them, got them drunk, killed them, and then they chopped up their body parts and dropped them in different trash bags around our town. And this is the weird thing, is my town is kind of like popular as a tourist attraction, but it's pretty small. Like, I mean, if you have 2,000, 3,000 people here, I think live here average, but like we get maybe 5,000, 6,000 in the summer, and it's so packed you can't even move. But we're in a small town, so that was a big event. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
chopping up body parts and dumping them all around town. You're like, oh my God. And they showed us this video in like government class. And I'm like, my mom works at that place that they picked the couple up at. And then they just took them back to their hotel room. I'm like, I worked at that hotel. And it was like, I did not know any of this information. I was like, secretly, it's
Jesus.
like, but it blows your mind away. That's like, oh my God, it really can happen anywhere, no matter if you're in a small town or if you're in a large
Yeah.
city. But it goes back to what you were saying, large population in America.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. But what about China? Is it because it's too big? Maybe that like you kill 10 people. They're like, I didn't even notice. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
because there's so many people living there. Or then we could talk about Australia. I love my Australian listeners. I love my Australian people. A lot of my good friends are from Australia, but that place started as a place of criminals. They shipped all
Mhm.
their criminals to Australia to survive, and they just built up. That's why they're so kind of tough. They use the C word like it's like a verb down there.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
yeah.
there's so many speculations. I think the whole true crime thing started around like bed and breakfasts. Like if you go to a bed and breakfast, you're fucking signing up the bill to be killed. I'm just saying. I mean, you're going into a stranger's house and you're like, hey, I'm going to spend the night here because I'm visiting a cousin from Ohio. And then it's like,
Yeah.
you get murdered. It makes sense because back in the day, I mean, it's probably easier to be a serial killer back in the day. Now it's just like, if you fucking do it, I don't know how you're getting away with it. They got cameras, they got DNA things, always finding semen on the dead body. I don't know how. Like, does
Mhm.
everyone have to jack off to leave their sign? I don't know. But
Yeah.
it's so much more difficult now, but there's way more killings than there were back in the day now.
Yeah. But the thing is interesting is that back in the 70s, which is when, well, 70s and 80s, is where most of the notorious serial killers were just rife. Again, like you said, there's no CCTV back then, there's no DNA analysis back then, there's no crime scene forensics to the level that they are now back then. So they could kind of get away with it. But you had serial killers, like we had a serial killer called Peter Sutcliffe, who was known as the Yorkshire Ripper, like a play on Jack the Ripper.
Mm-hmm.
So he was so arrogant, he killed like more than 10 females, and most of them were like sex workers, but some of them weren't. And then he would just get so pissed off when the newspapers weren't talking about him because no one could find out what the hell was going on, who this guy was. He would actually, like, when he killed someone, take the body and he would dump it in a field. And if no one noticed it, he would go back and drag it closer to the sidewalk so that people would notice the body. And then he would be back in the news. So it's almost like they get caught because they get too cocky and arrogant because they want to be in the papers. They didn't want to get away with it in a sick way. But the interesting thing about DNA analysis is I've just written a podcast which hasn't come out yet about this guy who he raped and killed this 14-year-old girl in 1981, right? And his semen was found on her jeans and on one of her socks. But back in 81, DNA analysis was non-existent. So all the police could do was keep that evidence in storage. And then what happened was, as DNA advanced and advanced and advanced, they managed to get a DNA profile off of the semen in like 1999. So 18 years later. But when you run it through the database, it only matches to people who've been arrested, which is kind of a flaw in the system. So if you run prints, if you've never committed a crime before and you commit a murder and they run your prints or match your DNA, there's nothing to match it to because you've never been arrested, you've never been put on the national database. But this guy then committed a crime in 2001. So this is 20 years later. He attacked his wife and she called the police. He got arrested. They took his DNA. Then they found a match. So 20 years later, they can match the semen from 1981 to this guy, then he gets put away for life.
So basically his 20-year-old kid got him arrested for the crime that he did because it's his semen.
This,
So that's his.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. That actually explains probably why the time when I was in elementary school, this could be a long walk for a short drink of water, but they started fingerprinting. Like they were fingerprinting kids in my school. They were saying like, oh, it's a cop thing. Like, oh, we're just having cops come down. They're going to show you how we fingerprint people, and they're going to do that. I'm like, they're slowly fucking getting everybody on their database to be able to track
mm-hmm.
you. Because what happens if you never commit a crime? I mean, for OJ, for instance, OJ wasn't arrested for killing his wife and killing that one guy. No, 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 no. He was arrested for stealing all his memorabilia back. They were like, you tried to rot. So they charged him with that. But I'm like, I guess the statute of limitations, I mean, is like forever on fucking murder, I guess. And it's a little bit different when it comes like, I stole a gumball from a shop when I was 5 years old. It's like, okay, that's where the bad road started. And he started slicing off people's heads and shit.
There are countries, though, I'm not sure if it's France, where after like 20 years, even murder, you can't get charged for it. I'm sure it's in France. So
Whoa.
It's like, you know how when a book comes out and after 100 years it becomes public record and you don't have to pay for the book kind of thing.
But okay, if you were gonna kill somebody, how would you do it? I'm not. That doesn't make you a serial killer. Me saying that. And first of all,
Is it?
if we talk about serial killers, like I think around what was it, 1956 or 1970 something, is when they stopped publishing terrorists as their names in certain news cases because it was actually getting them more attention. They realized that's what's actually what they wanted, was they wanted the
Mhm.
attention seeking thing. So they like stopped publishing names. But if
Yeah.
you're like, everyone's thought about it, everyone's seen a person in the store and be like, motherfucker, and just want to slam their head into it. I work customer service at a front desk.
Mhm.
I had a person the other day just rip into me like I was trash. And I was just like, yep.
Yeah.
I'm just slowly thinking like I would come to your fucking house. And it was like, I'm not a serial killer though, but I've heard the whole 9 yards of like, people say the easiest way is with an ice pick. People say it's
Mm.
like, I've heard a dude in Florida from a couple of my friends from a true crime podcast. They're called the United States of Horror. Talked about a guy in Florida put peanut butter on his hands and went to go beat up his neighbor because he had a nut allergy. And I'm like, fucking genius. Like, everyone's creating a better and different way of doing it. And it is horrible. But everyone, I think, at some point has had one person where they're like, I'll fucking end you.
Was it crunchy or smooth?
That I don't know the
Because
details, but
crunchy's gonna scratch him a little bit as well, isn't
I
it?
could tell you it was Jif. That's as far as I went into it.
The cheap stuff. Oh
Cheap.
man,
What are you talking about?
that's cheap peanut butter, isn't it? Jif. I mean,
Jif
we
is
don't think I don't think
expensive.
we have it here. We don't have that here. We have something called Sunpat, which is like cheap shit. It's full of palm oil.
Ah. You ever see the peanut? You know, I would kill somebody when the people that make the peanut butter where you open it up and it's a whole bunch of oil sitting up top, and you're like, what the fuck is
See, that's
this?
the pure shit. That's the pure shit. What I get. That's 100% peanuts.
Dude,
You
my
see,
head is so backwards. Though, like people like talk about serial killers. Oh, it's the wires that are crossed. My head's wired across of things that are good and bad. Like for me, a good movie is Green Lantern. Everyone fucking hates that movie. For me,
not
good
saying it.
food, saltine crackers. And people are like, what, you want a steak? I'm like, I'll take a fucking saltine, bro.
Just dry.
Just that's one food I trust because it never goes stale. And even when it does go stale, it tastes the exact fucking same.
But should you trust a food that never goes stale? Because what the fuck's in it?
I thought about that too. But then also, do you trust a food that goes stale like an avocado a minute after you buy it, where you're like, what the fuck? I didn't even get time to get
Mm.
home.
Or you open the avocado and you go to wash your hands, and then when you come back and it's brown because it's oxygenated.
That's why I don't eat avocados. For me, that's the mark of a serial killer. When I see someone be like, I just got a whole thing of avocados. I'm like, you're a fucking psychopath.
But yeah, coming back to your question, so when you say how would I kill someone?
Yeah.
Do you mean, and this is sick as fuck, do you mean to get away with it or to enjoy it? Like just brutal.
If I was going to give you the opportunity to be like, hey, you're gonna, this is the chance, this is the path, you start doing drugs. That always makes it a little bit more sentimental when people are like, well, he got into drugs first and then the drugs led him down the bad road. Yeah, I just give you the opportunity. Any way you want to do it. You could want to get caught or you could just do it for the pleasure of it. But how would you, like, if you thought about it? Like, I think we've all been driving and seen a person walking and be like, what happens if I just take my fucking car? And
Hmm.
how would you do it?
I'd jump on someone's face
Like
and
curb
just
stop?
no. Well, I mean that's pretty cool as well. But no, I'd just put someone on the floor, um, climb up to, I don't know, like top of a ladder, and just feet together, jump down and just bang straight on the face, just until it was mush in the ground. Just
I
keep
think
doing it.
just like fucking keep it's not gonna work the first time. I saw
Exactly, yeah.
I saw
It'd probably
worse
break my ankle the first time.
I saw worst workout videos, and it was a dude benching 3 plates on like a Smith machine, and there was
Yeah.
a dude doing like laying on the floor where the weights were, and he was stretching, and the dude took all 3 plates off one side. I don't even think it was a Smith machine. I think it was a regular bench.
Yeah.
But the whole bar flipped, and all the 3 weights fell on this dude's face. Didn't break. And I was like, yo, if you're jumping on somebody's head, it's going to take a couple of times. And then depending
I
on
think
your
I'd do it at
shoe.
this. Yeah, I'd do it. I'd probably wear like cleats, but
I,
I'd do it on the side because like the forehead's like the strongest, muscle. It's protecting your brain for fuck's sake. So you'd have to do it down the side, I think,
oh,
with cleats on. like
So
golf cleats.
you want the spikes to leave a mark in their face. But I was thinking, imagine if you did like Heelys or Converse where they leave the fucking symbol on his head when you do it.
See, I think with Converse, you'd probably just slide off. You know, when it starts to bleed,
Ah.
I think with the rubber, you'd just slide off, wouldn't you?
Would you pick a perfectly fit shoe or would you pick like a loose one?
I think it'd have to be quite tight. I think if it's loose, again, you're going to either twist your ankle or fall off and look silly.
I respect that.
You don't want to look silly when you're trying to kill someone, do you?
You only want to look silly if you're running out to your car to turn it on and someone leaves their shoes by the front door that are bigger than your feet. So then you put them on and they're like flip-flops. You're sliding. Here we go. Through your life, have you looked, like I said, people that eat avocados are psychopaths. Also, people that wear socks and then flip-flops on top of that, psychopath. What have you defined in your life to be like, that's some sketchy shit? Because look, let me tell you something. I have predicted so much into my life. I get very weird feelings about people. First of all, I predicted the Bill Cosby thing before it happened. I predicted Kevin Spacey before it happened. I predicted, what's his name? God, can't forget his last name. He had some sexual allegations charged onto him. Oh my God, it's going to kill me. Chris. He's a handsome motherfucker, but looks like a bird. We'll skip it. But then I'm also predicting Mr. Rogers. I feel like that guy's got some bodies in his basement. There's something wrong there. He's hiding something. Nobody announces that they're evil. Nobody that is truly evil goes like, I'm the jackal of the universe. No, it doesn't happen. They make it as nice as possible. And then they're like, well, that priest killed like 12 people. It's like, you fucking think, like, come on. You think he's this good, loving father?
Having said that, though, have you heard of Jimmy Savile?
No.
So Jimmy Savile, again, dead now, was famous in the UK. He hosted this TV show called Jim'll Fix It, like in I think it was probably the 80s or even the 70s. So kids would write into Jim and they would say, I wish for so-and-so, and he would make it come true. So that, you know, I want to visit a soccer player or do whatever. And Jim would fix it by letting him go and do it. Now, this guy was a creep, man. He looks like a creep. He acted like a creep. When he came out as having basically being a pedophile and raping all these kids and stuff and touching up people on TV inappropriate, nobody was shocked by that because this guy was like, it was almost rubbing it in your face that he was this way out. So Mr. Rogers, that's the dude with the bow tie, right?
Yeah, it's one that everyone's like, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. I'm like, he's talking about his fucking neighborhood. He does not care about yours.
Yeah. See, that's a very American thing. We don't have Mr. Rogers here.
I'm glad you are saved from pure evil itself. But then there's even that guy, like you said, rubbing up against people on television. That there's a guy that on Wheel of Fortune or Jeopardy or whatever that used to kiss contestants on the mouth. Like he used to like walk up and then handshake them and then kiss them on the lips. And then it's like when you see Tom Brady when he kisses his kid on the lips, it's still questionable when they're like 1 or 2. But you're like, okay, we're gonna let that slide. But the kid's like 5 and 6, and he's just kissing them straight on the lips, and you're like, that is a fucking psychopathic trait.
Yeah, that is a bit strange. I mean, my kid's 2 now. She still gets a kiss on the lips, but when you're talking school sort of age, I don't know. It's hard to say because like having a kid is different, so it's hard to say. Like, I'd like to think when she's 18 and shit like that, shit'll be way in the past. You know what I mean? Because that is fucking weird.
I just picture like a 20-year-old kid, like, hey, Dad, I'm going off to school. And then it's like, all right, give your daddy a kiss. And it's just like, oh my God.
That's so bad.
That's when I know it gets uncomfortable. I went snowboarding one time, and then there was like, we were just eating lunch, and there was a random person behind us. It was a daughter and her dad. And she was like, Daddy, when are we going to go on the mountain, Daddy? And she kept saying Daddy so fucking much. Like she said,
how old is she?
I mean, my age now, I was probably 15 when I saw her, but she was like in her 20s, easy. And she just kept saying, Daddy, Daddy, and it was just, every word was like Daddy. And I was like, oh my God, this is the most uncomfortable thing. And I looked at my grandma, I was like, do you see this shit? And she just goes, yeah, that's really weird. I was like, I mean, I get it. Some families are really close, but like, she was like, Daddy, I want to get a large fry. Daddy, you want to go down on that mountain next, Daddy? And it's just over and over. I'm like, bitch. Like, I hate to say it, but oh my God, please. And it's just the word daddy. Like, if you would say dad, that's different. But daddy,
Yeah.
and then the Y lingered. And I was like, yo, what
Yeah.
the? And I
It's got
couldn't.
some like fucking sick.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, some couples go like, have you ever been in a relationship and then someone's just like, yeah, daddy, give it to me. And you're like,
No.
no,
Hell no.
no. It's just everything is now numb from the waist down because you said
Yeah.
that. It's like, I've
No.
had that happen.
Really?
Yeah, when someone goes daddy, or if someone calls me like, oh, you're a sweetie, or it's like sweetie, or if they give you a nickname like that shit, I'm like, I fucking everything's down. Why are you doing this to me? Like you're talking to me like, I don't know, like we're
So
fucking.
what would you have them just call you your name?
Yeah. Nobody ever calls me my name. If you ever listen to my podcast, nobody ever says Robbie. It's always just like, yeah, man, and they just kind of talk, and I'm like,
Yeah,
okay.
but if you're in a relationship though, like the common thing would be like babe or something like that. You're not a fan of that,
I like
or is it
babe.
just is it just daddy that? Because daddy, no one calls people daddy here in England. Like
Daddy
even in a
scares me, and then if you say baby, I don't like baby. I like babe. Babe sounds all right, but like baby makes me sound like I'm like 5 years old. I get it. I look like a child, but at the same time, I don't want to be talked to like a child. Like when someone goes, "You're a cutie," like, okay, do you
that's a
want to be?
fucking insult, that
Do you
isn't
want to be cute or do you want to be fucking hot? That's the thing. It's like, and
it?
if you're, I remember like a dumb nickname that an ex gave me was Baby Cakes, and I was like, what the fuck is that shit? I'd rather you call me fucking Dick Lobato. I don't give a fuck, but don't call me like that. It just makes it sound like the relationship's 5. Like I have to pull out fucking coloring books or crayons or some shit. And I'm not gonna lie, I do them when I'm 26. Like I'll fucking probably be coloring still. I don't give a shit.
Hmm. But you don't want to be like, you don't feel very masculine when someone calls you cutie, do you?
I remember I heard Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers on an interview talk about like, what do you call your dick, Flea? And he goes, well, I tell my kid like, hey, I don't want you running around the house saying I got a penis. I rather you say I have a cock. Because what would you rather want, a penis or a cock? Like I get it. It's the subtle words,
He says that to
sometimes.
his kids.
Yeah. I consider that a good trait in a parent if they talk to their kid like they're fucking a person. When you give your like, I remember someone at my work was like, "Man, guests say that I'm a little bit rude when I talk to them," and I'm like, she's like, "Should I baby them?" And I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. It's not about being a baby. It's just talk to them like they're a human fucking being. Like when you talk to a deaf person or a blind person, you don't go, 'You want me to help you with that?' Like they're a fucking
Some
dog."
people do. Some
Oh,
people do.
those are
That's the
psychopaths.
people with kids, man. Like it's a real bugbear of mine that people talk to kids in like a baby voice. I hate that, man. I've always spoke to my daughter as in my normal voice, just treating her like a person. Like spend most of my time telling her off, but I've never been one for. Oh, hi, are you okay? Do you want to get this? How would you want to do this? I'm like, that's fucking degrading, man. I don't want to be spoken to like that.
It even hits me when I like do a podcast with someone like before we had the little like couple minutes where we said hi to each other and all that before we
Hmm.
recorded. There'll sometimes I'll be talking to someone and then it's like their natural voice, and then as soon as the mics start rolling, you're listening to K177. I'm like, what is just you just threw me off. I don't know what I was gonna ask. I don't know what direction to go into now, and it's like
Yeah.
that's I don't see. I believe it starts young. Like I think that probably you could look a lot of like psycho killers and a lot of things, something linked to their childhood. I believe that there was something like the
Yeah.
shoe killer, for instance. He liked being around, like he would hide in dressing rooms and stuff, and he would be like in the clothes racks and he would look at women's shoes when they would walk by. And he would try on shoes. And that's why he was known as the shoe killer.
Hmm.
Ah, it takes, I think there's also a time when you're an adult that you just snap because of so much pain. Like they talk about, like, I think the most popular woman serial killer, because there's just not a lot of women serial killers, is
Hmm.
Eileen Warnos, who like
Hmm.
killed a bunch of guys for no apparent reason. A
She was
lot
in
of
that film. That film Monster was about her, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
a lot of times it's just like a woman poisoning a dude's food. Like there was a woman, oh my God, this is like I don't even know if it's worse. I don't even know if it's more sadistic, but she poisoned a thing of Tylenol and
Mm.
she waited 15 years for this dude to take that fucking Tylenol. Like she had to wait till like he's finally got the headache. And it's like you sat on it that long, hoping that this would be the day he would take that one Tylenol that you poisoned. And I'm like, that's more of a, and it's really, really weird because like just recently, Virginia abolished in my country, United
Mhm.
States, 23 states, now Virginia has now abolished the death penalty. And people are like, I can't believe this is still a thing. And I'm like, you understand the perspective when they made that, right? Was that there's probably a person we've all met. I guarantee you, we've met one person in our life where if you found out he was a cop, you'd be like, oh my God, that guy's a cop. Like, because they're that fucking crazy.
Mhm.
That's what the death penalty was about, was like, hey, this person, there's no fix, or we don't have the time to try and fix this person. And instead of exiling them out, we're just going to murder them. And that's what the
Mhm.
thing was. But I have a little amendment to that now.
Mhm.
Imagine if you gave them psilocybin mushrooms or salvia, something that would throw you into another. Like when you take salvia, for instance, the best story I've ever heard on this podcast was a guy that took salvia and he spent 8 years as another person in Tyler, Texas, when he did it in Alaska. Like he was only gone 25 seconds. But this drug sent his mind into this thing that felt like 8 fucking years. He remembered counting the days on a calendar, sticking a gun in his mouth 4 years in, wondering if he shot, would it kill him in actual life? Or what? It's like being in a coma. You don't know how long you're in the coma. You just fucking wake up and you're like, whoa, my mind was like a My Name is Earl scenario. Give them salvia. If it lasts 25 seconds in real time, but they feel like they were paint on a barn for 20 fucking years, maybe that would change and make them look inside of themselves to change as a person. But they're like, nope, let's just fucking electrocute them. Zip, bop, and bam.
But what if it didn't have the same effect on that person? Because I imagine, I've never done it, but I imagine it's a different reaction for every single person.
Yeah, it's going to be a different drug trip. There are people that talk about they were a mermaid underwater for 5 years. There was a dude that was 20 years as paint on a barn, paint on a fucking barn. You can't even move.
So he was paint on the actual paint. That's what he experienced
You
for
can
20 years.
actually Google this story and read it. A dude spent 20 years after taking salvia. He was gone 5 minutes. 20 times salvia. He was paint on a fucking barn. He felt the weather hit, like he got cold when it was snowing outside. He got really, really hot. The paint would drip. He feel like he was melting. It's everything like fucking. And he slowly, towards the end of his trip, talked about how he felt like tired and fatigued as the paint because it had slowly been chipping off piece by piece. He talked about there's a little farmer boy that was on the farm and he would throw a baseball at the side of the barn and he would feel that. He would feel this thud, this like slap, like someone was just tapping his head. And I'm like, give somebody like inmates, you're going to spend 25 life in prison, or we can give you salvia and then you could change your whole life in a matter of 5 minutes. I guarantee you people would take that and that would reduce probably a lot of people that would be sentenced to death or imprisoned for a very long time.
But on the flip side of that argument, if they kill someone and their punishment, because the only person that can experience that trip is them.
Yeah.
So first of all, you've got to think that they could lie about it, first of all. Second of all, is it right that you lose a family member for life to this person? And all they have to do from the outside looking in is do salvia for say 5 minutes, and then they can get on with the rest of their life. If they're in the prime of their life, say they're 30 years old, let's say, then they, rather than going to prison for 30, 40 years and then being punished in that sense for what they've done, they get to carry on living their life. Oh, I've changed now, blah, blah, blah. But they've still murdered someone. Because the family who's had that person murdered, they're not a changed person. They have to live with that for the rest of their life. And then this person's just happy go lucky. Do you know what I mean? That's like the flip side of your argument there.
I can give you the example of General Butt Naked. There's a documentary called The Redemption of Butt Naked. He's an African warlord that used to eat people, like he used to eat babies. He used to like he would fight naked because he believed that if he would only wear sandals, which is
Mm-hmm.
fucking weird. It's like, do you
Not
jack off
practical,
with
that, is
socks
it?
on or off? You know what I mean? It's so But like he talked about like how he would hide underwater and he would watch these kids come over to the little lake and splash water in their face and do all this. And he would come up, grab them, break their neck, and then throw them underwater and just do it for fun. He would go around town dressed as a woman, and he would just attack men and do all these crazy shit with his army of butt brigade is what he called them. Now, he had a
Wow.
dream that the devil came to him and said he was going to hell. He found Christ and then completely went the opposite way. He started tearing up African like armies where they were enslaving children to fight for them. He would break those apart. He would build foundations. He spent so much money trying to redo everything, all the pain that he's caused, and he doesn't even want redemption. He's like, I can't forget any of these things I've done. I've seen the faces of everyone I've ever killed. Drugs take you to a place like that. You don't need to find Christ, but they take you to an inner inflection into oneself because they can sometimes scare you so much that it shows you that you're this evil, corrupted being, which is like my point of like, and I had someone message me like, how could you support an African warlord? I'm like, we've all made mistakes. And I'm not saying what he did was right and he should be forgiven for that, but a person that is trying to make a change and he's trying his best, giving to foundations, all of his money goes into support of trying to start nonprofits to be able to help these kids and find them homes and give them an education. I mean, he learned from watching the animals around him. In Africa, alligators pick up animals and they grab them and bring them underwater and snap their necks. That's how he learned. We learned from hunting bears here in America, hunting wolves, hunting this. Everyone learns from the things that are around them. So I'm like, I don't believe that anybody is unredeemable, which is why I have a problem with the death penalty, because I'm like, nobody's unredeemable. There's some way you can fix somebody. It doesn't need to be electroconvulsive therapy. It can be just an inner reflection, maybe in a drug trip or something. But I get the death penalty idea because people are sometimes like, I don't have enough resources to give this guy 30 fucking years of therapy. I can't do that. So it's just best to just chalk them up on the board. But then people get angry because they're like, what about Florida and their death penalty? They killed like 10 mentally challenged people in a row. And it's like after the first couple, they were like, are you just fucking picking up mentally challenged people and just electrocuting them? Like, oh, fucking sorry. Like, it's questionable because, especially when it comes to true crime, much as you probably have found through doing your research, in the court systems, it's all a fucking game. Everything is about having a clear winner and a clear loser, even sometimes blending truths and blending facts. I'm pretty sure with the amount of true crime stuff that you have covered, there's plenty more cases of people that were wrongfully imprisoned for something they didn't do because they're always looking to convict one person. And it's a win record.
Yeah. So what's your thoughts on, just coming back to the death penalty, because there was a documentary a few years ago, I don't know if it was in Florida, but they had one of the substances, in the lethal injection, one of the, because I think it's 3 different things that they use. One of them was approaching its expiry date. So again, I can't remember if it was Florida, but it was in America. So the government said, right, we're running out of this and we can't get it restocked. So they were just trying to kill prisoners on
That's
death
fucking
row
horrible.
as quick as possible, which obviously caused a massive controversy.
That's really horrible.
The argument, though, again, I'm not saying I'm either for it or against it, but you've got to think they're on death row. By the nature of the courts, they're guilty of something, but like you say, some people might have been falsely accused. You don't know what the truth is behind the story. But if you're on death row, do you think it's right, if it exists in that state, that you should be on death row for 10, 20, 30 years? Do you not think there should be?
I consider that cruel because you're making the person wait knowing that they're going to die. Some
Yeah.
people and also some thoughts would be like, well, I see the perspective if you're talking about like, well, it's giving him a chance to, but you're letting him sit and marinate knowing that he's going to die and you're going to let him sit and wait. That sounds horrible.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like you're also giving him more life and a longer time to live. I consider it very, very sketchy with the death penalty that some states only offer a last row meal. Like other states go above and beyond. They're like, what do you want for your last meal? I want a Domino's pizza. And they'll name like 80,000 things where something has to be shipped in from fucking France. They'll fucking do that. And then some states are like, what do you want for your death row meal? Can I just get Ben and Jerry's ice cream? And the guy's like, you'll take a fucking apple because that's what we're serving at lunch today. And it's like, that sounds really fucked up. But man, waiting on it, I don't know, because it's you can find points on either side. It's like if they're gonna die anyway, rush them through, get it over
Yeah.
with instead of making them sit and marinate on it.
You'd just be anticipating it, wouldn't you, for ages?
What would you say?
I think it shouldn't be dragged on and on and on. I think if you're on death row, maybe 6, 12 months max, I would have thought. I think what if you're on death row, you've done something really bad. You've done it in a state where the death penalty is legal for right or wrong. Let's assume that the person who's on death row has done something really bad in this case. I don't think it's fair to have that person, because they're still a human, to live day by day not knowing that when they wake up, someone could walk in and just say, today's the day. Because the longer you drag it on, after 5 years, you're going to think they're never going to kill me. And then to come in and say, we're going to kill you next week, you'd be like, what? I've been here for 5 years. Why now? Why are you doing it? You know, why do I get a week's notice? I've been here 5 years. If it was like, right, you're on death row, you've got an execution date for 6 months down the line, I think they could mentally prepare themselves for that. That's what I think. I don't think leaving it and not setting them a death date is fair, personally.
I see yeah, because like if you look at it, like even if you give somebody 6 months, you could prep yourself for those 6 months, but the day it's happening, the day they strap you in the chair and they're getting ready to do either electric or if they're going to inject you, you're
Mhm.
fucking all that prep is gone. Like you're like,
Yeah,
I don't want this to happen. I don't want this to happen.
obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're bound to, because you're human. You know, you're going to be scared. Anyone that says they're not scared on death row, it must be a psychopath.
It's like the movie Green Mile. Like they had that movie was very sad. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
But, like, when you're watching the dude with the mouse, and it's like you could tell, like,
Mm,
he doesn't seem like a bad guy. He might have made a mistake or might have did something wrong. But even then, when he's crying on the thing and they didn't wet the sponge and shit like that, it's like a
awful.
lot of the stuff. It's like, oh my god, thank God that was back in the day and not now. Thank God we're so much better now. And I'm like, I just not even that long ago during the coronavirus pandemic, they had a thing where they told people not to resuscitate mentally challenged people. Like, don't resuscitate them if they die. And that still happens today. A lot of shit goes on that, like, they'll pronounce you fucking dead and you're not dead. They told, I think at the start of this pandemic, they had it's popular Joe Rogan episode I'll point you to. It's with Jim Brewer. It's like 1651 or something like that is his newest
Mm-hmm.
episode. He had a friend that went to the hospital. They said that he was eventually he just got really, really sick. He actually stroked out and they were chalking it up to coronavirus. But what happened was they weren't giving him his cholesterol medication, so his brain had strokes. They said that
Mm-hmm.
he's brain dead. That and then they ended up telling the family that you can't see him because he's brain dead. He's dead. He's gone. He's done. You're not gonna be able to talk to him. The dude was still fucking live. He was still
Mm.
breathing and talking and doing. He wasn't brain dead, but they told the family that he had died, and like it makes you question, because there was an interview that came out a very, very long time ago. And this is where I say, like, even with politics, if you want to be a politician and you're not actually doing something good, or if you're going under the guise as being good, you're probably evil. Is because they had an interview where they were like, they were finding out that when babies were being born, they were telling the parents that the baby died during childbirth. Just didn't, sorry, your baby's no longer with them, and tell the parents we're sorry. But they would have vans come and they would take that baby and they would use stem cells. This is what the scary stuff with stem
Mm-hmm.
cells started happening. But there was an interview, a guy from like Texas was like, we're going to make the baby comfortable. We'll make the mother comfortable. And it's like, what the fuck are you saying? What are you saying? Well, it's not really late term abortion. If the baby's born and the mother doesn't want the baby, then what we do is we'd say, hey, the baby's dead. And then next thing you know, we take the baby, get shipped off by helicopters and vans. And it goes down a very weird conspiracy rabbit hole. But I'm like, what's different from back in the day to what we're doing now? It's just turned into a whole new fucking form. Killings are still happening. I think since 2021, we've had over 103 mass shootings already. We're
Mm-hmm.
fucking what, 3 months, 4 months in? It's like, that's fucking scary, man. I just believe it's all still happening and it's progressively getting worse because I think there's a mental health issue on the
Mm-hmm.
board. There's a depression, there's a suppression issue. There's so much fucking going on. That's why I was in, like, when I saw your podcast, we don't hear about it a lot about the UK killings and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was curious to know if it was different there. I know like the Oprah Winfrey interview came out and
Mm-hmm.
everyone's like, mental health. I was like, no shit. It happens everywhere. Everyone experiences mental health, but some people consider that very, very private and some people want to openly fucking talk about it. So it just makes it more relatable when you find that it's not just in your own country something's happening, another country experiences it as well, which is like why I enjoyed seeing your podcast. I was like, oh fuck, thank God there you don't ever hear about that. Everything gets pinned on America because everyone hits the major ones like
Yeah.
OJ or fucking just something going down the line, something everyone already knows and they want to know more about.
Yeah. I think the fucked up thing here is that we've had a ban on all guns since 1996. So there was a shooting in a school in Scotland, Dunblane, and since then, guns have been banned here. I assume if you're in some kind of gun club, you might be able to have one, but guns here, I wouldn't know where to get a gun. If I saw someone,
Hold on. I'm just shooting quail. It's like, but there's a lot of fucking people chained up
yeah,
outside your house, man.
exactly, yeah. But like, if someone had a gun on the street, you'd be like, if we saw a gun, we'll do whatever the fuck you want. But here, that means as a result that there's a real knife crime problem. So a lot of the gang-related incidents here are stabbings,
Oh,
which
see,
so much more personal to stab
that,
someone.
that's what I was about to say is that you got to look at the perspective of like that's horrible because yeah, you ban guns, people are just going to go find another way to go to something. But that is
Mhm.
so much more personal that you have to like I feel like if you're going to stab somebody, it's either a gang thing, which is there here's the pudding for you. Remember you asked about the pudding? We're going to
Mhm.
segue back to the beginning. There was a dude that got stabbed 87 times on my local boardwalk, which is like 2.5 miles of just like boardwalk games, carnival games, all these types of
Mhm.
shit. Got stabbed 87 times and they chalked it up to a gang killing because the fact that you have to stab somebody in and out 87 fucking times, you literally, that's a personal vendetta. That is a
Mhm.
thing that you only find with gangs because it's a blind allegiance, killing somebody because you want to get in with this group of people that you consider your family or your brothers or whoever. Um, or it's something like with OJ, for instance. There are some times you have an argument or you have a fight with someone where you're like, I get it. And they're like, what? And it's like, I get why OJ was outside of his house, like fucking hands behind the head, waiting for the cops to
Mhm.
come because you got to understand the heat of the moment. I mean, you're betrayed trust wise because you found your wife sleeping in a bed with somebody else. I'm not saying what he did was right, but you got to see the perspective of how much that would fucking hurt you that someone would do that to you. And some people can't handle their anger well. Some people get hurt.
Mhm.
You know, some people get into an argument, they get so upset they start crying because they're so fueled with emotion that they can't handle it. Like they can't be like, fuck you, man. You know, it's just got to
Yeah.
be this snap scenario. And it
But on the
brings
flip side of that, sorry to cut you off. If he, let's say, because obviously he was acquitted of that, but we all know he did it.
the glove didn't fit,
Um,
bro.
oh, it's ridiculous. But yeah, the fact that he did that, yeah, the glove does.
It's like a
My hands are
doctor putting on a glove and fucking snaps it.
just like in caught, and then like, yeah, the glove doesn't fit.
I'm
Whatever.
surprised they let that fucking happen. I would have been like, yo, he's not. It's like when you have a child's mitten, you know, you can get your hand in there, but you're like, oh, it doesn't fit. I need a better. I want the gloves I actually want, not these ones that you gave me.
Yeah, the Chewbacca defense. That's what it's all about. But the fact that so he does that and he's outside and he's like, well, I lost my temper because my wife's been fucking about on me, so I killed them both. I couldn't handle my anger. My bad. But it wasn't my bad. He got the best criminal defense team he could get, and he's pleading not guilty. So he's going through a trial. But so my point here is, if you commit something and you snap, right? Because everyone has that thing where they can snap. We've all worried about it, like you say. We've all thought about killing someone, but most of us have the cognitive thought to not do it.
Yeah.
But if you did do that, most people would go, "Fuck, I'm in trouble now." Like, yeah, all right, I did it. My bad. I'm sorry. I'll take the consequences. But you have to be like a next level kind of psychopath to then try and pretend that you're innocent and say I have a right to a trial until you prove that I killed someone, knowing that you did it. That's fucked up, man.
Yeah.
That's really fucked up. So that's why people like. I mean, and he proved it again because he fucking got arrested for stealing all his old shit back. Like, how desperate you are
Yeah.
for that? Do you know what I mean?
But I
But
mean, we can bring up the Bobby Brown example, the king of the Godfather of Soul. He
mm-hmm,
got arrested for waving a gun at a I think it was a finance office right beside his house because I think somebody used his toilet and took a shit in it. So like he got pissed off and then he waved a gun at them and then he was on a high speed pursuit. So like people snap. I just feel like
mm-hmm.
It depends on like obviously a level of fame. There are people that are probably really famous that get away with a lot of shit, but I think killings are the exact same as they were back in the day, just taking a new form. I mean, Charles Manson, for instance, everyone considers him a horrible psychopath serial killer, but a guy had spent 20 years writing a book on Charles Manson, dug into all his personal investigations, all his crimes, everything, and has found out that the truth is the government was drugging him. The government was giving him drugs because he would immediately get arrested and then let out of jail, like not even like a day later. Like they were like, why you? It's clear evidence you found him there killing these people. Why are you letting him out? And the government was having him be released, and he would just keep doing these killings because they were throwing drugs at him and having him doing these experimental things. It's an amazing book. I'll have to send you the link. But
Mm-hmm.
you're like, it's still fucking happening, just in a different form. Whether it's telling a mother that their baby died during childbirth, or they're saying, "Oh, sorry, you can't see your grandparent. He died. He passed away from COVID." And really, they're still fucking there. I mean, it
Yeah.
just takes a new form. Now they're talking about, like, I think the big thing is now is that even with the vaccines, there's a new third wave of the coronavirus coming. So it's like, oh, the vaccine's not going to work. So still do all these precautions like you never even got the vaccine. It's like, what are you fucking doing? Are you still trying to find a way to like say, oh, this person died of COVID? Like once I read that and I heard that story, I was like, man, how many people, like, let's say, God forbid, knock on wood, God forbid, that your 2-year-old had coronavirus and they have her in the hospital and they say that you cannot see her. You're going to do everything you possibly can to make sure you get in there. If that kid, if they tell you your
Mm-hmm.
kid's about to die of coronavirus, you're going to fight your fucking ass off, which is so fucking weird because when my grandma was passing away, we didn't put her away in a home. We didn't put her in hospitality. We didn't take her to a hospital. She wanted to die in her house. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
when she went to the hospital, when she was in severe condition, and then we ended up bringing her home, they were literally like, "You can't see her." I'm like, "You're telling me I can't see my grandma that has been like a parent to me because of coronavirus?" Like, fuck
Yeah.
your coronavirus at that point. And people are like, "Well, that's you're just killing other people." No, no, no. If you have a loved one and somebody tells you you can't see them, you're going to take every risk possible to be able to see them, which is
Mm-hmm.
like, it makes it questionable of like, is that worse than stabbing somebody 87 times? That's more of a psychological thing in my mind.
I think it's because it's so like covert that a lot of people will listen to what you've said then and think he's talking absolute bollocks. A lot of people will think, yeah, man, the government's against us and all this shit. You can see it from both sides, in my opinion. The thing that fucked me off was that people,
I'm sorry, you said fuck me off.
yeah, that means that annoyed me. That's what
I,
that means.
I like that a lot better than annoy. That's awesome.
So the thing that fucked me off was when they're
Even better
saying
the second time.
is when so there's big I'll let you recover. There's cases that have been right where people have like tried to end their own life, for example,
Mhm.
and then they end up in hospital because it didn't work. They're taking a load of pills and it didn't work. Then while they're in hospital, they contract coronavirus and then they die as a result of the damage they've done to their body. Now that would get marked down as a COVID death, not a death with COVID, as a COVID death. Now, there's arguments for that I've seen, which is because if you class it as a COVID death, you might get more funding at the hospital. This
Yeah,
is an American
you
thing
get,
I've
I
seen.
think you get about $250,000 per COVID death.
Yeah, versus a normal death. Again, this is just what I've heard. I don't know if it's true or not. I don't know the details of it, but when you hear things like that, and like over here, we're currently in like a rollout period in England. So we've been in I think it's our third lockdown now, but there's like this roadmap set to going back to normality. So there's different stages where you can do a little bit more, you can do a little bit more, you can do a little bit more. And I think they've vaccinated about 20 million people, and there's around 80 million here. So, but you say, right, if I get the vaccine and my grandparent gets the vaccine, because we have bubbles here, so you can have households that are in each other's bubble that can see each other. But if they're not in my bubble, but they've had the vaccine and I've had the vaccine, can I go see them? No. Okay. If I see them outside, can I give them a hug? No, you still have to be 2 meters apart. So what's the fucking point?
I think there's an aspect of like when you can tell people what to do and it's not like seen as being very, very forceful. It's more on the lines of being like you're making them live in fear. there's a giant aspect when you open up those doors that a lot of people that get put into power, it's not easy to give it up. It's not easy to be like, hey, everything that, yeah, we're going to listen to you, but now we're not listening to you anymore. If you create fear in their head, it
Mm.
makes it like, because having power is like, if it's really cool, because like, if not really cool, I would say, but it's like interesting. This example is like, imagine like people that get divorced or separated from someone that they love or something like that, and they have to pay, like Johnny Depp has to pay a lot of fucking money to his ex-wife now, because she won a court case where everyone's like, justice for Johnny because he did wrong.
Mm.
Everyone knew she lied, but she got away with it, and in court it was decided in her favor. But there are cases where like a couple would separate, and there was a woman that went to every single major top lawyer, like the best of the business in the area. And what happens is, even though she didn't go with any of those lawyers, she went with another one. It was strategic. She did it because he couldn't go to those lawyers because they can't take the case now that they've talked
Yeah.
to her. So
Yeah.
it's like you get adjusted to a certain standards of living. If you're living off $1 million a day or something like that, and then they ask you to go down to 100, you're going to be very upset and you're not going to handle it well. Same thing with the
Hmm.
power thing. If you have a bunch of people fearing you and doing everything that you say, and then they start revolting against you, you try and find another way to keep that fear, because once you let in that power struggle thing, you never want to give that fucking shit up. And
Hmm.
we're gonna, like, it's what people are talking about. Why are people pushing back? Because people are fucking pissed off that everything that they're doing is being, it's why everything on the news now, you have to filter it through something, is because it all comes off so fucking crazy. You know what gets me? Oh my God, I did not want it to go this way, but I'm going to say it. Um, Welcome to conversation, my brother. Uh, when the news reports a death or something, they say a black man shot. Why? Why don't you say a man was shot? Why the fuck does and people,
Why they prefixing it, you mean?
yeah, but people say like, oh, well, that's it's because people need to know that it was this guy. I'm tired of all this stuff happening. I get that perspective. I do. But the fact that you're prefixing that, or you're saying this specific detail that has nothing to do with a person that is now dead, you're programming. You're trying to do something that's getting a bunch of people frustrated and trying to start fights because they see, oh, it's this guy or it's this. It's a fucking human being. Anybody that has a sense of empathy or wants everyone to truly be equal and love all people, it's an aspect of, why are you fucking including that detail? Why are you
Mm.
doing that? A person is gone. A life, if you understand the value of a human life, which makes it so mind-boggling that somebody could kill another person. Imagine you're 30 years old and you're from a parent's perspective. That 30-year-old is dead now, got hit by a car. That's 30 years of this of time, of love, of compassion you put into a child that is now gone. If you could
Hmm.
understand that perspective, race, gender, none of that shit fucking matters. That is a person, and we're all the fucking human species. But everything they say of trying to create equality is like, you're pointing out, or you're highlighting a lot of stuff that is not really creating equality. You're going the opposite with it. And I get the perspective of it. I understand what the intent is there for, but they're not seeing what that's actually truly doing. They're doing something a little bit more evil. And I believe, like, the fact that the death penalty still thing is fucking nuts to me. The fact that there are some still racial equalities and all this stuff is like, what the fuck are we doing? It's
Hmm.
2021. Take a break on Mars and let's fix this shit. But they're still doing things of keeping it into your head that it's this severely highlighted issue. It's this severe thing. And it's like, I get it. If some people experience it, I don't know how to say this properly, but it's like you're not really doing what you're saying to do. And the example I could use is like, if a comedian, when you see a person on stand up or whatever doing a comedy show and on TV, you're like, wow, I'm laughing at a woman comic. What the fuck? Like that, I get it. You feel like you're, oh, well, I'm fucking hip. I'm woke. That woke thing is like so backwards, because you should be laughing if it's funny. You shouldn't be laughing because, oh, look at me. I'm so woke. I'm laughing at a woman comic. You're like, what the fuck you didn't give a fuck if you laughed at someone's joke. You didn't care if they were a guy, girl, white or black. You laughed because the joke was fucking funny.
Yeah.
That's the thing that they're doing with the news and media. And it just goes, it gets me so frustrated, because I'm like, I've been a minority in every position I've ever been in my entire life. Even growing up in my area, I'm just fucking a minority. It doesn't fucking matter. I've never ever felt uncomfortable around another person because I consider them a person, not a
Mm.
gender, not an ethnicity. Yeah, there's clear marks of that's a female, that's whatever. Who gives a shit? They're a person. If they treat me with respect, they treat you with respect. And that's why it
Mhm.
boggles my mind. Like when I see like a true crime case or a murder on the TV, and I'm like, what the fuck gets a person to that point? And I think it's just everything in society is like little micro fractures onto your brain that just push you to like the edge or push you to a point where that spot that's supposed to tell you, hey, don't fucking do that is gone. You know, it gets farther and farther every single time. I don't know how to properly finish this sentence, but it's just an aspect of like it's so confusing the times we're in today where if you look back in the day, the same shit's still happening, but
Mhm.
I don't know what it is. I don't know why we have more going on than it is now. It's just crazy.
It's sad to think that such historical things like racism, homophobia, now transphobia, all this stuff, the fact that it exists in 2021 baffles me. But like you said, some media outlets don't help that because the people that watch the news, it's a lot of people, right? And a lot of people might not realize that certain news stations have a certain bias leaning one way or the other. So they don't realize, maybe they do realize, maybe that's why they're watching it. Personally, I don't watch that much of the news because I find it quite depressing, especially with all the COVID stuff and how our government's handled, like the Brexit and all this kind of stuff. I don't really watch it. But it's like you say, how they prefix things with adjectives, and it kind of, like you say, sometimes it takes the focus away from there's a dead person here to the person. Doesn't matter that that person's dead, male, female, or whatever, but it's their race that's being highlighted. And like you say, I understand why they're doing that, because there is a lot still in this day and age of inequality, of, you know, racism and all this hierarchy, and trying to get people, holding them back because of the race or the gender and all this kind of stuff. And I get why the media is putting it out there, and in their sort of mind they have to prefix it with that because it pushes a little bit of an agenda. But like you say, it kind of takes away from the fact that someone, a person, has died. That person isn't limited to their race or
Yeah.
their gender or their sexuality. It's a person. I don't care what people are. Like, if you want me to refer you by a certain pronoun, that's fine. You do you, but don't fucking force it down on me.
Yeah.
Like my thing is, I'm a straight white male. So people would say you have white privilege. We don't usually use that in the UK. I think, again, that's more of an American thing that's doing the rounds at the minute, this whole white privilege male thing. But by definition, I'm a white privileged male, according to the woke left. I'm not left or right. I'm not political.
But you notice the people that call you that are white people. It's not like other people
Yeah,
that are, and
no, of
it's
course.
crazy because I'm like, I had somebody berate and this is like where I talk about like I have problems with feminism. Like you probably heard me talk about before. It's
Hmm.
not the idea of feminism. It's the idea of the people that are enforcing it want you to feel like you need to pay because you're a male. And I'm like, what the fuck is this shit? And I had a person tell me that, and I'm like, white privilege. You tell me I have white privilege, and they're like, yeah, you have white privilege that you don't even know about. I'm like, let me ask you something. What makes me worse than you? And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, have you ever at any moment in your life when you were growing up have to open up your fucking oven to heat your house? Have you ever fucking done that? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, okay. I don't consider that privilege. I consider that struggling. And for
Hmm.
some reason in our country, in countries, in the ideals of a lot of people, poverty, being poor, is associated with a wealth class or associated with a race. It's not. It's anybody can be fucking poor. I'm white. I was poor. It's not. It all stems from the statistics that where you read it on a news outlet talks about, well, places of this certain ethnicity are poor, and then it programs into your fucking head that, oh, that means poor is related to this ethnicity. No, it's fucking not. Anybody can experience that. Anybody could
Hmm.
do that. Anybody, like people say, oh, you had a ghetto childhood. when the word ghetto gets involved, you immediately associate it with an ethnicity. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
no. Anybody can be fucking poor. I remember my mom would tell me before I went to the fucking bus stop, as soon as you get off that bus or whatever, make sure you go in the house. I mean, in the house, lock the door, and you don't fucking open it up for anybody until I get home at 7 o'clock. And I'm like, fucking okay. But people will be like, oh, that's this certain ethnicity childhood. That's how we grew up. And I'm like, it's fucking just where you grew up, when you what wealth class was your family, what neighborhood you fucking lived in. It was this whole
Mm-hmm.
other ideal that the news has associated with a race. And I'm like, man, we're so fucking programmed and we're all fucking realizing it now. And we're like, I want to fix everything. And we're ripping apart all the wires without fucking paying attention to what we're ripping out, where everything is going like fucking, we're attacking each other. And that's where I start to look at it like, why? I get it. But you're only damaging everything. You're damaging not necessarily like that things are going great, but you're damaging stuff to where people are afraid to walk out of their fucking house because they're afraid of COVID, because they're afraid of this. I'm like, we're living in a world of fear, and fear produces what we've been seeing as these psychopathic tendencies. It's like amount of suppression. Eventually you just break out and say, fuck it all. And then you end up killing yourself or something. And I'm like, oh man, it's just like I much like talking to you right now. I can tell we both have a sense of empathy. We both understand, like we just want people to do their thing, leave us alone as long as it doesn't bother us. We're just
Mm-hmm.
trying our best to be able to live. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
Exactly.
the world doesn't see that. The world says, well, you don't understand what pain is. And it's like, what? Everyone's pain perspective is different.
Yeah,
Everyone is
it's
experiencing some type of loss, some type of turmoil, but they see it
mm-hmm.
as like, no, this is what's being highlighted by the news. And it's like, why am I related to the news? What the fuck does that have to do with anything?
Mm-hmm. You never know what's going on in someone's head, which is and their experience is unique to that person. So you could walk down the street, and let's say it's weird that you walk down the street now and people fucking cross over the road because they don't want to catch COVID from it. It's like, come on, man. It's just ridiculous. But anyway, if you say you're at a petrol station, right? And you're taking a little bit, or a gas station, and you're taking a little bit too long, and the dude behind you is like beeping your horn. He's like, get out the way, blah, blah. And you're like, all
So
right, mate,
you
calm
take that window
calm
washer and
down.
you go, wham,
Yeah.
right?
So you kill him. And then yeah. So you think, fucking hell, what's up with this guy? And you think, or let's say someone cuts you off and you're like, wanker and all this stuff. Like, you don't know what that guy might be having the worst day of his life. He might have just been fired. Like, he might have found out that he's got cancer, for example. Some shit might be good. Maybe he's just a prick. You don't know. You don't know what's going on in that guy's head. And this is it's so hard not to judge people by their one isolated incident, which I guess brings it back to the whole thing about people fuck up and they snap and they commit murder. So maybe if they did the Salvia thing, they could sort of see the light and mend themselves, I guess, and become a functioning member of society. Maybe it's like that. But some people are just assholes and they do that all the time. But you will get someone who does something like cuts you off or crashes into you or does something, beats you up when they're drunk, whatever. They're not a bad person. They've just snapped. Maybe they've had a bad day. It doesn't excuse the behavior, but that's why we have the justice system. In theory, it's supposed to take it into account, that person's background. Although, having said that, interestingly, with the case I mentioned with the guy who had semen on that 14-year-old's jeans and her sock, and he got caught 21 years later, the jury he'd been sort of only arrested one time for domestic violence, but all three of his wives, he had beaten them up, kicked them in the belly when they were pregnant, choked them when they had kids in their arms, all that horrible, horrible person.
Did anybody do a background check on him? Like, if you're gonna marry someone and you find out like this, or let's say for you, for instance,
Get back in the day, innit?
yeah, but if you're gonna marry a chick and you find out that she's been widowed 7 times, and you're like, what happened? Well, they all fell down steps.
Yeah,
You're
I
gonna
get what you're
fucking,
saying.
you're gonna be like, hey, I don't know if I want to continue this relationship. You might post and
Yeah.
ghost.
But the thing is, the jury on his case for the rape and murder of that little girl, they weren't told about his history of domestic violence, because even though he has a history of that, and in theory, his character is a bad guy, it's not fair in the trial to have a preconception about that person, because you have to judge everything on the evidence that's unique to that charge. You can't think, oh no, there's not enough evidence that he committed the murder, but he's an absolute bastard who beat up his wife, so let's plead guilty. It can't work like that. It has to be just in theory. Again, a lot of it probably is corrupt, but that's what it has to be like. You can't go into a case, because if you've not murdered someone and you're being framed, for example, and you've been arrested in the past for beating up people, and the charge is murder by GBH, or just grievous bodily harm, and the jury is told that you've been arrested 5 times before for beating people up, they're going to think, of course he did it. This is what he does. You can't have that. It's almost like, when you say don't think about an elephant, what are you thinking about?
I thought of an elephant for a second, then I changed it to an ostrich.
But you thought of an elephant.
Yeah.
Because it's planted in your head.
Damn it.
Yeah. I'm not a magician. That's just how the mind works.
David Copperfield.
Well, we've got a guy over here called Darren Brown. So he's like, his title is a mentalist. So he does mind control and stuff. Oh, it's all about the power of suggestion. This is a different tangent, but it's interesting. It's like mind control. So he will talk to you and give you subtle nods like that, and you don't know he's doing it, and almost giving you, the difference between a closed question or a leading question and an open question. So he would word what he's saying so that your answer is already predetermined by him. If someone says, you're a guy, right? You go, yeah, but that's a closed question. It's also a leading question. I'm telling you what the answer is to that question already without you knowing it. So when I say you're a guy, right? You'll be like, yeah.
That wouldn't work today, because people would be like, did you just assume my gender? And then you'd be like,
not in 2021, but in the 90s and the early 2000s. Yeah, that's how it would work. The funniest thing he ever did was he's speaking to, he's a white guy. He's speaking to a woman in the street, just a high street. And he gets 2 crew members to walk past in between them with a massive billboard that's so big it covers both of their whole bodies, so you can't see the other person for 5 seconds. What he does is, as the billboard moves past them, he walks away and an actor comes in his place. But the actor's a black guy, so a completely different race to Darren Brown, carries on the conversation as if nothing's happened. And the woman looks a bit confused, but then she thinks, well, it must be the guy I was talking to. Carries on the conversation with the guy, even though it's a completely different person. So the reason why I mentioned that is that's why witness testimony in court cases is so unreliable, because something could happen 10 minutes ago and you could tell the story to someone. If you try to remember the story tomorrow, you might think you remember it, but you actually might not remember it correctly. Like, you could think back to something that's happened in your past. What we tend to do is focus on the positive and the happy memories from an event. So you might say, oh, I went on holiday to Ibiza. Like, I went on holiday to Ibiza 2014. Great holiday. Oh, yeah, we went to the clubs. We did this, we did that. But then there will have been stuff that happened that you don't remember, that you're purposefully trying to forget because it's negative. Whether you had a bad meal, whether you had an argument with someone, whether you didn't enjoy a club because the music wasn't good, you don't remember that stuff. So if I was to tell the story of what happened for that holiday, it would already be incorrect because I've already forgotten. You don't remember the mundane, do you? The mundane things that happen, the boring stuff. You don't tend to remember that. You only remember things that are positive. Because if you hung on to all that negative shit, you'd just be well depressed. Also, fun fact, I don't know if it's still true, but if you write a confession to killing someone, that is not good enough to get you charged for that crime.
Yeah, I knew that. I knew that there had to be some also more evidence behind that. But I bet some people have probably gotten away with the confession thing.
Yeah, especially if they want to pin you for something.
All right. So I have a case suggestion. I don't know if you ever break out of just stuff that's happened in the United Kingdom or from British true crime, but there was I could be getting this wrong, but it's a very, very interesting topic. A woman had been stabbed with a knife, and she had given birth. Now, here's the weird thing about it. This woman was not pregnant and she was born without a vagina. There was no vagina, but the knife had semen on it. And it had stabbed her and it had punctured through and somehow fertilized an egg, and she had
So
given
she had a womb, she had ovaries, all that kind of stuff. She
but
just
she
didn't
didn't
have.
have a vagina. She didn't
Okay.
have an opening for it to come out as. Something there's like I said, you have to do a little bit more research into it. But it was a knife wound, and she gave birth 9 months later. And I remember hearing that, and I'm thinking in my head like, how, why, what, how did the semen get knife on it? But the crazy thing was, I was like, imagine being that baby and be like, "How are you born?" Well, random guy stabbed my mom, and then 9 months later, I was born. You're like, "What the fuck? Do you like stab? Like, oh, you guys banged, right?" No, 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 no. She was legit stabbed with a fucking knife, and I was on the semen of that knife, and it punctured in through my mom, and then I was born. That's an interesting topic. I want you to Google that and do a topic on that.
So many. Here's a counter offer for you. Okay. So here's a counter offer. I'm gonna make you do the work here. So what I do on my show is I do 10 episodes. Then between seasons, so that would be a season. Between seasons, I normally have like a couple of special episodes. So what I do is, why don't you research the story, come on my show and tell me the story and I'll react to it.
I'm gonna
How about that?
fucking duck go it because Google's bullshit. Don't trust Google.
How about that for a offer?
I'm down 100%. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. We can do
That's
that.
I got it. And I'm really curious. I need to look into that story now
I've got
because
so many questions, but I want to save it for an
what
episode.
what would you name the kid?
You can't call him Stab, can you? Or Stab
You
Baby.
can call him
What-
Stab if you want.
I'd call him Ken Kniff.
You can call him Stab. It just depends on the last name. There's a woman whose last name's Ball and her name is Crystal. And you're like, that sounds like a fucking fake name. It's like, yeah, but my name's Robbie Robertson, so fuck it. You know, like people eventually you just have it's your kid. You can name whatever. I'm gonna name my kid Beowulf. I don't give a shit.
Yeah. Is your name Robert though? Or is it Robert?
Yeah, it's Robert.
Yeah.
But
So I can see why you use Robert.
the only time anybody well, on my birth certificate it says Robbie, but my legit 100%, like if you look at my license, says Robert for some reason. I don't know. It's because they don't believe that Robbie could be a first name. I was like, we have like 12 people in my family named Rob. So
Your birth certificate says Robbie, so
yeah,
that's your name, surely.
yeah,
But on your license and stuff, it says Robert.
yeah.
That's weird.
Because for some reason, I guess when I got my license, Robert is like Robbie sounds like a nickname for Robert, like you were saying.
Yeah.
So that's what they assumed. So they, without even asking me, they just typed it in. So like I'm like, oh, that's not my actual name. It's like everything says Robbie on it. And no,
Yeah.
I've never. You only call me Robert if you're yelling at me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a friend called Ben, and I always call him Benjamin, but his name's not Benjamin. It's just Ben. I say it just to piss him off.
Who's that one dude? Ben Bezos, not Jeff Bezos, not Scott Bezos. His name is Warren Wilhelm something. He's a state governor or something in California or something. But his name is something different than what people know him as. Like his real name is Warren Wilhelm something. And it's like, well, then how the hell did he get Bill? Like, where did Bill come from? And it's like a pseudonym name. And I'm like, that's so hard about words today and things today. Everybody goes by a pseudonym. It's so hard. It's like, did you arrest fucking John Colby Jones or his real name is Alan Johnson? And you're like, and then here's another thing. Bernie Madoff. You remember that guy?
Mm-hmm.
He literally did what his name said. So maybe it is the power of suggestion. Fucking Lyndon B. Johnson. He showed people his Johnson. What the fuck? Like,
yeah, that's true.
The power of suggestion, my friend.
That's what it is.
All right. Stuart, where can people find you at? Where's people can find your podcast, Instagram, Twitter?
I'm on everything. So I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and then you can stream it everywhere: Spotify, Apple, Castbox, all that stuff. I'll send you my link tree and all my shit's on there, so you can just put that in the notes and people will find me. Just search British Murders and you'll find me.
Yeah, I'll make sure I link that in the description. Is there anything you want to end on?
I don't think so. No, I've enjoyed the deep conversation with someone across the Atlantic.
Across the pond, we say.
Across the pond, yeah. Across the Atlantic, it's more formal.
You don't know if I'm on the Pacific, son.
You said you're on Eastern time.
You just gave away my time zone. That's like giving away a location. Now, let me tell you about my address.